Hello everybody, the FPS tester here, aka Verda, and today we're going to be benchmarking Enshrouded. Now, I actually benchmarked this game a couple times when it first released a few months ago. I haven't played it since, and I thought, you know what? It's had some optimization updates, I believe, so let's go ahead and check the game out again, see what kind of performance we can expect. I'm testing the RTX 3060 Ti today with the 7800X 3D with 32GB of DDR5 6000 MHz RAM. I have the game installed on a SSD, and we're going to be testing 1080p and 1440p today, maybe some other resolutions, we'll see. So to get us started, I'm benchmarking 1440p with the maximum quality preset using DLSS. By default, that's on. And so let's jump in the game. And as you can see, this is an incredibly rough experience here at 1440p. You are definitely not going to be playing at 1440p ultra settings in this game. It's just not going to happen. It actually seems like performance may be worse than when the game first released. At least this is what I'm thinking, because I believe... Yeah, maybe I was using DLSS with the maximum quality preset when I benchmarked this previously because I was getting around 20 something frames. But now I'm like at 15, 16 FPS here, which is just abysmal. Not even 20 frames here. I am up in the starting area. I'm on a single player world. There's nothing really on this world. So you will expect to see much worse performance if you're playing multiplayer and you've got big structures and so on. So yeah, we're not going to waste any more time on this because you clearly cannot play this at 1440p. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've switched the resolution to 1920 by 1080, still playing at max quality with DLSS. Let's go ahead and see how this does. So performance here at 1080p is significantly better, even though I was expecting it to not be this much better. We're almost getting, if not double the frame rate here, which is kind of insane. I wasn't expecting it to be such a difference because usually going from 1440p to 1080p is not that big of a difference because the resolution really isn't that much larger, to be completely honest. Let's go ahead and fly down here. I'm just going to fly down. I've got a little starting area here. I've not played this game in months, so I'm very out of touch with how to play this game. But as you can see down here, we're getting about 30 FPS, and we are using maximum settings here. Our VRAM is at 7.5 gigs, so we're almost maxing out the VRAM here that the 3060 Ti has. Let's go over here and fight these basic enemies. When I last played, I must have played as a tank. I switched roles, I'm pretty sure, with my group. I was playing with about 20 people, which was kind of crazy. Yeah, the RAM usage, 24 gig, you know, it's really, I think we're getting past the point where, like, you can get away with 16 gigabytes of RAM. It's just not really a thing anymore for a lot of games. Obviously, you can still play older games or competitive games, but a lot of the games seem to be using, like, at least 20 gigs of RAM these days. I'm sure they run on 16 gigs of RAM. It's just going to be a much more unpleasant experience, probably, with FPS drops and so on. Surprisingly, the 1% lows are at 28 FPS, so even though the FPS is really, really low, it's pretty smooth, like it's consistent. And I imagine if you're somebody who plays with a controller, this might be playable for you, in all honesty. Personally, I wouldn't play at this FPS, but yeah, if you're somebody who just plays casually with a controller, maybe. But I would highly recommend you just lower some of the settings, which is what we're going to do now. So we're still on 1080p. I've swapped the preset to quality, which enabled DLSS by default, and enabled it at balance setting by default, so we're going to leave it as that, and let's see what kind of performance we can expect. Now, I just want to quickly say straight away that I can't really see a difference in terms of graphics, to be honest with you, but then again, it is 1080p on a larger resolution monitor, so the game always looks a little bit funny for me when I play at 1080p. It never will look as good, so it's kind of hard for me to tell the difference. But in terms of shadows and stuff, I really can't see that much of a difference. Even though we got DLSS on, it's not too blurry. Those trees over there do look a little bit blurred, but that could just be because I'm playing at 1080p. We were getting around 50 FPS there, but now that I'm running over here, I'm getting 37. I do know that there are more intensive areas in the game, but just for keeping it consistent, I'm going to benchmark here primarily, just because that way you can kind of compare the FPS. All right, so on the quality preset, not much of an increase in FPS. So I've just put it to 1440p using the quality preset with DLSS unbalanced. And surprisingly, the performance is very similar to 1080p. There's almost no difference in FPS. Like, there is a slight difference, but not a whole lot, in all honesty. I've only lost about 4 to 5 FPS on average, going from 1080 to 1440, which is not what I expected. You see, when I look at the ground, I get 60 frames. So is that the trick? I just have to look at the ground the entire playthrough? Look at this, 76 FPS. So as long as I'm not looking where I'm going, I can actually play. All you have to do is learn the entire map and then just know where you're going, and you can look at the floor the entire time, and then that way you can have a solid frame rate, as you can see. No, but in all seriousness, yeah, I wouldn't personally play like this, even with the quality settings. 30 FPS is just too low for me these days. I would not play a game like that unless the game is set to 30 FPS and it's supposed to be played that way. So we're still at 1440p resolution. I have gone ahead and switched the quality preset to balanced, which uses performance DLSS by default. So let's see what kind of performance we can expect. And already this is a massive jump up in performance. We're almost 60 FPS here. Do bear in mind that I am using NVENC, which does use a little bit of performance, usually about 5%. It fluctuates from game to game. So I am using NVENC to benchmark, so I just want to give you that disclaimer. I always leave that disclaimer in the description that I'm using NVENC, so expect to see about 5% more FPS. I am planning on getting a capture card so that I can benchmark with my main PC with no performance loss. But until then, I'm having to use NVENC, so I hope you don't mind too much. So yeah, more than playable. This feels really, really smooth. 1% lows of 52, though I'm not feeling it. Frame time graph, as you can see, is really, really smooth. I'm not feeling that those 1% lows of 52, because in terms of how the game looks, it looks completely fine. Even though we're using DLSS on the balanced setting, I believe it was. Let me just quickly take another peek, because I forgot what it's on by default. It's actually using performance DLSS, but it doesn't look bad. It actually looks completely fine. It is a bit blurry at distance, but at the end of the day, most of the stuff that you're doing is right in front of you. So, you know, when you're in combat and stuff, you're probably not going to notice it. Let me know in the comments if you can see the blurriness of the DLSS, because I personally could not see it. I would say for 1440p, if you don't want to mess around with settings and so on in the game, you just want to click a preset and play with it, balanced is clearly where it's at for 1440p. Alright, so I've switched it over to 1080p now. We're still using the balanced preset with DLSS performance by default, and let's go ahead and see what this is like. And in all honesty, it's not that much of a jump up in FPS from 1440p. We're getting around 70 FPS, which will be about 75, 77 FPS if I wasn't recording. That's more than playable. I mean, you would expect it to be 1440p on balanced preset, work totally fine. 1% lows are a little bit higher, just under 60 FPS, so even smoother than the 1440p testing. Balanced preset on medium still looks totally fine. A little bit blurrier than before, but it is because it's a 1080p on a larger resolution monitor, so it will always look a little bit blurry for me, unfortunately, because I play my games in full screen, even at 1080p when I'm on a higher resolution monitor, because I cannot play windowed mode for the life in me. I don't know how people do it. Massive stutter there. You guys saw that. That caught me off guard, but yeah, that was a huge stutter. First one so far, so not too bad. But yeah, 1080p balanced preset works totally fine. So now I'm going to be testing 1440p using custom settings that I just put together through a couple of minutes of playing the game and just testing different graphics and so on and so forth. And so all I did was I set the max quality performance. I then changed the DLSS to quality. I have increased the texture resolution to quality, which is the maximum. Put the shadow quality to balanced, which is one above the lowest. And I turned contact shadows on, turned indirect lighting on to quality. I also put the SSAO to performance, which was off previously. And these are the settings that I think look okay while giving you very good performance at 1440p. So let's check them out. Getting around 70 FPS. Which is more than playable. The game feels very smooth. Had a little hiccup there, a little bit of a stutter. I did feel it. But you probably have already noticed that the ground is missing all of the grass. It kind of reminds me of like an old Nintendo game or something like that, you know, where there was no grass on the ground in like any of the games usually. Like it reminds me of like one of those kinds of games. Personally, I don't mind there not being any grass in a game like this because it has a cartoonish kind of, you know, graphic style to it already, and it makes things on the ground easier to see. Personal preference, of course, but as you can see, 60 FPS here. Most places though were around 70 frames using these settings, so I think it's more than fine, personally. I would play the game like this. Obviously, you can mess around, find your own settings that you want to play with, but I just thought I'd give you an example of like a different preset that you could put together on your own. Game doesn't look blurry because we are only using quality DLSS. You could increase that if you want. We did see earlier that performance DLSS looked totally fine, at least to me. But yeah, around 60 to 70 frames using this preset. Is it ugly to you? Would you change something? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I think it looks fine. So let's check this preset at 1080p. All right, so I've set the game to 1080p using my own custom preset with DLSS at quality. Let's go ahead and check it out. And here we are, 75 FPS, 80 FPS. Game looks totally fine. I'm pretty happy with this. And throughout all of this, the CPU has been anywhere from 10 to 20% usage, it would seem. So, you know, because we're not pushing so many frames, the CPU is just kind of relaxing in this game, which is surprising. A lot of games or a lot of releases in the last year have been very, very CPU intensive. I've noticed that in my YouTube comments, like a lot of people are having issues with their CPUs because a lot of games have been coming out and they're even pushing my CPU to like 40% utilization and stuff, you know, like the finals and stuff. The finals, I think it was using like 40% of my CPU. But yeah, a lot of games this year and to the end of last year have been really pushing CPU usage for a lot of people to the point of where they're really limited, like getting 40 FPS in modern games, and their GPU is not able to max out because they're CPU bound. But anyway, to get back on topic, 75 frames here, up here with the custom settings at 1080p. This is more than playable. Okay, and now we're at 4K resolution using my own custom preset at DLSS quality. Let's see how it does. I wouldn't say this is that playable, 40 FPS here. I mean, it feels fine. It doesn't feel that bad here, but I know that in certain boss fights and so on, you're gonna lose quite a large chunk of FPS. You know, when you go down into big mob fights, down in those caves or whatever they're called. I don't remember what they're called, you know, where you get skill points. So, you know, if you want to have a solid 60 FPS or a solid 50 FPS or something, you want to make sure you've got a little bit of leeway in terms of how much performance you have left with your GPU. Doesn't mean you have to necessarily play at 80 FPS. You can cap your FPS at 60, but you want to make sure that when you're in more demanding areas like those boss arenas and so on, where it will require more performance from your GPU, you want to have the headroom for the performance, right? So you want to be ideally in an area like this at least 75 FPS, I would say, so that when you get into those more GPU intensive areas, so you don't go underneath 60 or 50 FPS or whatever you want to play at, right? But yeah, 40 FPS up here, for some people this will be totally playable, but I guarantee you when you get into those more intensive areas, you're going to have issues. For sure, you're going to drop below 30 most likely. And you don't want to be in a boss arena with 30 FPS, I don't think so. So clearly my settings will not work for 4K, but then again, I didn't make them for 4K. So let's go ahead and see what the normal presets are like on 4K. So we're still at 4K resolution. I've just gone ahead and switched the quality preset to max performance, which utilizes DLSS at ultra performance. So we'll see if the game can run on the lowest settings possible at 4K and see how stable it is. So here at 4K, I don't know if you can see this, but on the lowest settings, for some reason, there's like this really weird texture bug where there's like a line on everything. You see this? I don't know what this is. I've never seen this before. Performance-wise, 75 frames. Now, does the game look bad? Actually, I don't think it looks bad. I don't know. You may think otherwise. This is the lowest settings in the game with the DLSS on ultra performance. But I don't think it looks bad. Like, it doesn't look blurry to me. It looks totally fine, but 75 FPS, 80 FPS here at 4K resolution. Technically, it's not native 4K because of the DLSS, but you know, 1% lows of 66. This is a very smooth experience. Now, the only issue I'm having is these lines on the floor are very, very ugly. But other than that, yeah, this is totally playable at 4K. If for whatever reason you have a 4K monitor with a 3060, you know, I can imagine there's some people out there who are on a tight budget, you know, maybe their 4K graphics card just broke and they're like, crap, I need to play at 4K and I need that, you know what I mean? Like, maybe, depending on the games that you play. Very small niche of people, I would imagine, but yeah, let's go ahead and try a higher quality preset. All right, so we're at 4K resolution still. Set the preset to performance, which is one above max performance. I know, crazy. This utilizes DLSS at performance preset. And let's go ahead and see what this is like here. You can probably already tell that going from lowest settings in the game possible to performance, literally one preset up, increases the amount of clutter in the game substantially. I mean, look at how, like, look at the difference. It's like literally night and day. It's crazy. Personally, I don't mind not having any grass on the floor. But other than that, yeah, the game looks completely different. It still looks totally fine, obviously. Some people will say it looks better than the lowest settings in the game. I mean, it does, but at the same time, some people might like the more simplistic graphic style of having everything set to low, because it does remind me of like an old Nintendo game. It kind of looks like Zelda or something, you know what I mean? The game looks totally fine. It's completely playable. Again, the DLSS, you can't really see any blurriness, at least I can't. Let me know if you can. I can't see it. I do want to note that I render and upload my videos at a very high bit rate, so even though YouTube does compress my videos, because I upload my videos at such a high bit rate, they're still fairly high quality. And just for the sake of it, let's drop down into a boss arena, because I've not done one in a few months. I don't even know where they are. I'm pretty sure that's one right there, to be honest with you. So let's go ahead and fly down and we'll see what sort of performance we get down here. I haven't done this with any of the other benchmarking, of course, because it would just take me way too long to do boss fight after boss fight. We'll drop down here. There should be a boss fight, right? Yeah, it is. Right. I honestly do not remember anything. How do you roll in this game? Okay, it's alt. Oh my god, look how fast I kill this boss. FPS did drop, just not by a whole lot. I am cutting it down, it's just very, very slow. Oh, I was supposed to use my axe. Even down here, 60 FPS with this preset. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and try and get a custom preset for this because I don't feel like there's any point. This performance preset looks totally fine, so I don't feel like I need to mess around and try and find better settings. I don't know if I will be able to. Yeah, at 4K resolution, this game is still playable. Insane. Anyway, that's going to do it for today's benchmarking guides. If you found any value in this video, please go ahead and leave me a like. It helps tremendously with the YouTube algorithm. Let me know what you want to see in the future in the comments, or if you'd like to see something change with the video style. And until next time, take care everybody, and goodbye for now.